Mira Dawson traced the rim of her coffee mug, her fingers trembling as though the ceramic might steady her thoughts. The house was silent, eerily so, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Across the table, her husband, Ethan, scrolled through his phone, oblivious to the knot of unease forming in her chest. "Did you move the keys again?" Mira asked, her voice hesitant. Ethan glanced up, his brow furrowed. "Keys? No. They're on the hook by the door, where they always are. They weren't there this morning. I checked, twice." Ethan shrugged, a shadow of concern crossing his face. "Maybe you just missed them. You've been preoccupied lately." The word stung, sharper than it should have. It wasn't the first time Ethan had mentioned her distraction, and Mira hated how it made her feel. Unsteady, unsure. She forced a smile and took a sip of her coffee, trying to shake off the unease curling in her stomach. Later that afternoon, while Ethan was at work, Mira stood in the hallway, staring at the key hook. The keys hung there now, plain as day. She picked them up and turned them over in her hand, the cool metal grounding her in reality. But why hadn't they been there this morning? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mira opened it to find Serena standing on the porch, clutching a bottle of wine and wearing her signature red lipstick, the same bold, sharp shade that always seemed to overshadow every family gathering. "Mira, darling," Serena cooed, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You look tired. Are you sleeping at all?" Mira's lips tightened. "I'm fine. Just a busy week." "Busy, huh?" Serena raised a perfectly arched brow and set the wine on the counter. "Well, lucky for you, I brought the cure." She smiled, all teeth, and reached for 2 glasses. Serena's presence was as overbearing as ever, filling the room with an air of practiced superiority. But today, something about her tone set Mira's nerves on edge. "Serena, have you been coming by when I'm not here?" Mira asked suddenly, the question surprising even herself. Serena froze mid-pour, then tilted her head with a practiced look of amusement. "What a strange thing to ask. Why would I do that?" "I don't know." Mira's voice softened, doubt creeping in. "Forget it." Serena handed her a glass of wine. "You're wound up. You need to relax, sis. I was just telling Ethan the same thing the other day. You've been so tense lately. He's worried about you, you know." Mira's stomach sank. "You've been talking to Ethan?" "Of course. Someone has to look out for you." The wine glass felt heavy in Mira's hand as Serena's words lingered in the air. Her sister's gaze was unwavering, her smile too perfect. Mira forced a sip, the bitter taste of the wine doing little to ease the sour feeling in her stomach. Later that night, Mira lay in bed beside Ethan, staring at the ceiling. His steady breathing was a reminder of the normalcy she so desperately clung to. But normal didn't explain the keys or the way Serena's words echoed in her head long after she'd left. A shadow of doubt crept into Mira's mind, chilling her to the core. What if Serena wasn't just looking out for her? What if there was more to her sister's concern than met the eye? Chapter 2. Threads Unraveling. The smell of burnt toast greeted Mira as she walked into the kitchen. Ethan stood by the toaster, swiping at his phone with one hand and scraping charred edges off a piece of bread with the other. "Morning," he said, flashing her a distracted smile. "Morning," Mira replied, leaning against the counter, her arms crossed. The faint tension from yesterday lingered between them, though neither of them addressed it. Ethan set down his phone, brushing crumbs off his shirt. "Hey, by the way, did you leave the oven on last night? I noticed the light was still on when I came down for water." Her stomach tightened. "No, I didn't. I'm sure I turned it off after dinner." "Well, it was definitely on." His voice carried a note of worry, but he kept his tone casual. "Maybe it's just stress. You've been forgetting little things lately." Mira flinched inwardly, but she masked it with a nod. The words stayed with her long after Ethan left for work. Had she left the oven on? No, she was certain she hadn't, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing roots. Later that day, Mira sat in her home office, staring at the blueprints spread across her desk. The clean lines and measured dimensions usually grounded her, but today they blurred together, refusing to make sense. Her thoughts kept circling back to the oven, the keys, Ethan's comment. A knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, Serena stood there, her arms full of grocery bags. "I thought I'd bring a few things by," Serena said breezily, brushing past Mira into the kitchen. "You looked so pale yesterday. I figured you could use a little TLC." "I'm fine," Mira said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Fine," Serena repeated with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You always say that, don't you? But Ethan's worried. He told me you've been off lately." Mira's chest tightened. "What do you mean off?" "Oh, nothing serious." Serena waved her hand dismissively, her voice light but laced with condescension. "Just little things, forgetting appointments, leaving things on. It's not like you though, is it?" Mira stared at her, a mix of anger and confusion bubbling to the surface. "Why are you here, Serena?" Her sister tilted her head, her smile softening into something almost pitying. "I'm just trying to help. Someone has to." Mira's phone buzzed on the counter, cutting through the thick silence. She glanced at the screen. It was a reminder for a doctor's appointment she didn't remember scheduling. "What's that?" Serena asked, leaning closer. "Nothing," Mira said quickly, grabbing the phone and turning it face down. Serena's smile returned, wider now, as if she knew something Mira didn't. That evening, when Ethan returned home, Mira had been rehearsing her words for hours. She waited until he'd hung up his coat before stepping into the hallway. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. Ethan frowned, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" "It's Serena," Mira began, her hands trembling. "She's been interfering, coming over uninvited, talking to you behind my back." Ethan's brow furrowed, his confusion clear. "She's just concerned, Mira. She said you've been under a lot of stress. She's trying to help." "Help?" Mira's voice rose, the frustration spilling out. "Ethan, she's meddling. She's making me feel like I'm losing my mind." Ethan hesitated, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Mira, I know things have been hard lately, but maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist, maybe, just to sort through everything." Mira stared at him, her throat tightening. "You think I'm crazy, don't you?" "No," Ethan said quickly, stepping closer. "I don't think that. I just think you've been overwhelmed. And Serena, she only wants what's best for you. We all do." Mira turned away, her chest constricting. It wasn't just Serena anymore. Ethan was starting to believe her too. Late that night, Mira woke to the sound of something shattering downstairs. She sat bolt upright, her heart pounding. Beside her, Ethan was still asleep, his breathing steady. She slipped out of bed, grabbing her phone and tiptoeing to the staircase. The house was silent, but a faint glow spilled out from the kitchen. Mira's pulse quickened as she approached. On the floor lay a shattered mug, the shards glinting in the light. Her keys were on the counter, placed neatly beside the wine Serena had brought over. Her hands trembled as she picked up the keys. She was certain she had left them by the door. From the corner of her eye, she saw the faintest movement outside the kitchen window. A shadow slipping into the darkness. Her breath caught. She rushed to the window and peered out, but the yard was empty, the street lights casting long, empty shadows. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A text from Serena lit up the screen. "Everything okay? I couldn't sleep and thought about you. Just checking in. Love you, sis." Mira stared at the message, her grip tightening on the phone. The timing was too perfect. Serena wasn't just meddling. Serena was watching her. Culture, Chapter 3. The cracks deepen. Mira sat at the kitchen table, her notebook open in front of her. The page was filled with chaotic scribbles, snippets of thoughts, scattered accusations, disconnected events. She flipped back to a cleaner page and started a new list, writing in sharp, deliberate strokes. Keys missing. Emails I didn't write. Serena's visits. Ethan's growing doubts. Her hands stilled as she reread the list. Alone, each incident seemed minor, missteps that could happen to anyone. Together, they formed a pattern she couldn't ignore. The doorbell rang, jolting her. Mira hesitated before answering, half expecting Serena to be standing on the other side. Instead, it was a delivery man holding a bouquet of white lilies. "Delivery for Mira Dawson?" he asked, handing her the flowers. Mira frowned as she accepted them. "Who sent these?" "No card," the man said with a shrug. Mira carried the lilies to the kitchen, their sharp fragrance filling the air. She stood staring at them, unease prickling the back of her neck. It had to be Ethan. She wanted to believe it was a kind gesture, something meant to soothe the tension between them. But when Ethan returned home later and she mentioned the flowers, he looked genuinely confused. "What flowers?" he asked. "You didn't send them?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "Maybe Serena did." Her stomach sank. She didn't want to ask Serena anything. That afternoon, determined to find answers, Mira drove to the florist listed on the tag attached to the bouquet. The shop was small and quaint, with shelves overflowing with colorful arrangements. A teenager behind the counter looked up as she entered, her boredom evident. "Hi," Mira began, forcing a calm tone. "I received lilies from here earlier today. I was wondering if you could tell me who sent them." The clerk raised an eyebrow but typed something into her computer. "Name?" "Mira Dawson." The girl nodded. "Yep, here it is. Ordered yesterday. Paid in cash, no name attached." Mira's heart sank. "Can you tell me anything about the person who placed the order? What they looked like?" The girl squinted. "I think it was a woman. Blonde, red lipstick, kind of intense." Mira's stomach dropped. "Serena." "Thanks," she said tightly, her fingers clenching around the counter. Back at home. When Mira returned, her suspicions were confirmed in the worst way possible. Serena was already there, standing in the kitchen with Ethan. The two of them were laughing, the sound cutting through Mira like glass. "There she is," Serena said brightly, turning toward Mira. "I was just telling Ethan about this great spa retreat. You'd love it, Mira. A week of yoga, facials, massages. Doesn't that sound perfect?" Ethan nodded. "Sounds like a great idea. You've been so stressed lately." Mira's chest tightened. She felt like an outsider in her own home. "I don't need a spa retreat," Mira said, her voice sharper than she intended. "What I need is some space." Serena's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "Oh, honey, I'm just trying to help." Mira's glare didn't waver. "You've helped enough." The tension in the room was suffocating. Serena turned to Ethan, her tone softer now. "She's clearly upset, Ethan. Maybe you should talk to her." "I'm fine," Mira snapped before Ethan could respond. Serena picked up her purse and flashed a tight smile. "I'll leave you two alone. But Mira, really, think about the retreat. You need it." As the door closed behind her, Mira turned to Ethan. "You believe her, don't you?" Ethan hesitated. "Mira, you've been acting different. She's worried about you, and honestly, so am I." Mira stared at him, her chest hollow. "You think I'm crazy?" "No," Ethan said quickly, stepping closer. "I just think something's going on, and you need help sorting through it. Maybe talking to someone would—" "I don't need a therapist, Ethan. I need you to trust me." He opened his mouth to respond, but Mira turned away, walking upstairs before he could say another word. That night, the house was dark and still when Mira woke to the sound of something breaking downstairs. She sat up in bed, her heart hammering. Beside her, Ethan was fast asleep. She grabbed her phone and crept down the stairs, every step slow and deliberate. In the kitchen, she froze. A shattered mug lay on the floor, its broken pieces glinting under the soft light. Her keys were on the counter, neatly placed next to the wine Serena had brought. Mira swallowed hard. She was certain she had left them by the door. From the corner of her eye, she saw the faintest movement outside the kitchen window, a shadow slipping away into the night. Her breath hitched as she rushed to the window. She peered out into the yard, but the space was empty, the street lights casting eerie, stretched shadows across the lawn. Her phone buzzed in her hand, jolting her. A message from Serena lit up the screen. "Everything okay? I couldn't sleep and thought about you. Just checking in. Love you, sis." Mira stared at the text, her hand trembling. The timing was too perfect, too calculated. Serena wasn't just meddling anymore. She was watching her. Chapter 4. The fight begins. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Mira sat at the table, her notebook open to a fresh page. Her pen hovered over the paper as she thought through her next move. The evidence she'd gathered so far felt like pieces of a puzzle, incomplete but revealing enough to expose the shape of Serena's manipulation. Emails I didn't write, flowers I didn't order, Serena's perfectly timed visits, Ethan's doubts about me. She wrote the word proof at the top of the page and underlined it twice. Later that morning, Mira parked her car a block away from Serena's townhouse, her heart pounding as she stared at the building. The spare key Serena had given her years ago still hung on her keyring. Mira hadn't used it in years, but today was different. She scanned the street for signs of movement before walking up to the door. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it, stepping into the foyer. The faint scent of Serena's signature perfume lingered in the air. Mira moved quickly, knowing her time was limited. She started in the living room, scanning shelves and drawers for anything out of place. Serena's meticulousness was maddening. Everything was perfectly organized, with no signs of her schemes on display. When she entered the office, Mira's eyes were immediately drawn to a locked drawer in the desk. She rummaged through the desk's other compartments until she found a letter opener and used it to jimmy the lock open. Inside, she found exactly what she was looking for. Printouts of emails supposedly written by Mira, detailing her fears about her marriage and her desire for Serena to help Ethan. Receipts for the lilies, ordered weeks ago. A journal filled with notes in Serena's handwriting, plans, observations, and ideas for subtly undermining Mira. Mira's hands shook as she took photos of everything, her phone's camera clicking softly in the quiet room. Then she heard the sound of a car door slam outside. The confrontation. Serena's heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she entered the house. Mira ducked into the nearest room, pressing herself against the wall and holding her breath. "Mira!" Serena called out, her voice cold and sharp. "I saw your car outside. You're not very subtle." Mira stepped out from the shadows, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "You've gone too far, Serena." Serena's lips curled into a slow smile. "Have I? Or are you finally realizing how far I'm willing to go?" "I know everything," Mira said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins. "The emails, the flowers, the lies you've been feeding Ethan. I have proof." Serena tilted her head, her amusement unshaken. "Proof of what? That you broke into my house? That you're paranoid and delusional? You'll make my case even easier." Mira held up her phone. "I took pictures. I have all the evidence I need to show Ethan and the police if I have to." For the first time, Serena's expression faltered, but she recovered quickly, stepping closer. "You really think Ethan will believe you? After everything I've shown him? After all the times you've doubted yourself?" Mira's jaw tightened. "You don't get to control me anymore. It ends here." Serena laughed, a sound that sent chills down Mira's spine. "You've always been naive, Mira. You're a child playing a game you don't understand." Mira stepped forward, her voice firm. "I understand more than you think, and you're about to lose everything." Serena's eyes narrowed. "We'll see." That evening, Mira didn't tell Ethan about her confrontation with Serena. Not yet. She needed to be strategic, to ensure she had every piece of evidence lined up before exposing the truth. As she lay in bed that night, scrolling through her phone, she came across an app for discreet audio recording. She downloaded it, her mind racing with ideas. If Serena wanted a game, Mira would play. But this time she'd make the rules. Chapter 5. Laying the Trap. Mira sat in her car outside the coffee shop, gripping her phone tightly. This wasn't just about proving she was right anymore. It was about reclaiming her life. She checked her phone again, ensuring the recording app was open and ready. The trap she was about to set would only work if Serena fell into it willingly. The door of the cafe swung open, and Serena strolled out, her heels clicking confidently against the pavement. Mira watched her approach, every step exuding the arrogance of someone who believed they had already won. Serena slid into the chair across from Mira, a small smirk tugging at her lips. "This is unexpected," she said, crossing her legs. "What's on your mind, sis?" Mira leaned forward, her expression calm. "I thought it was time we cleared the air." "Cleared the air?" Serena tilted her head, her smile growing. "Oh, this should be good." Mira's thumb hovered over the record button before she pressed it, concealing the movement beneath the table. "You've been busy, haven't you? Sending flowers, writing emails, and planting doubts in Ethan's mind." Serena's smile faltered briefly before returning. "Those are some serious accusations. Feeling paranoid, are we?" Mira leaned closer, her tone sharp. "Don't play games, Serena. I know what you've been doing. You're trying to take my life, my marriage, my sanity, and make it yours." Serena chuckled, the sound cold and hollow. "You always were dramatic. Do you even hear yourself? No one is going to believe this little story of yours." "They will when they hear what you've done," Mira said, her voice low but firm. For a moment, Serena's expression shifted, her eyes narrowing. Then she leaned back in her chair, her smirk sharpening into something venomous. "Face it, Mira, you're unraveling, and everyone can see it. Ethan thinks you're losing your grip. The doctors? They've already documented your episodes. Who do you think they'll believe?" Mira kept her gaze steady, refusing to give Serena the satisfaction of seeing her crack. "You're underestimating me, Serena. That's your first mistake." Serena's lips curved into a mocking smile as she stood, grabbing her purse. "We'll see about that." As Serena walked away, Mira let out a shaky breath. Her thumb hit the stop button on her phone and she saved the recording. She had what she needed that evening. Mira sat on the couch, her laptop open, as Ethan walked in. He loosened his tie and glanced at her, his face cautious. "How was your day?" he asked. Mira didn't look up. "Eventful. I had coffee with Serena." Ethan stiffened, his expression shifting to concern. "You did?" She turned to face him, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "She admitted everything, Ethan. The emails, the flowers, the lies. She's been manipulating you and me for months." Ethan frowned, skepticism flickering across his face. "Mira, I know Serena can be intense, but do you really think—" Mira cut him off, grabbing her phone and tapping the recording. Serena's voice filled the room, every word dripping with calculated malice. "Face it, Mira, you're unraveling, and everyone can see it. Ethan thinks you're losing your grip. The doctors? They've already documented your episodes. Who do you think they'll believe?" When the recording ended, Mira stared at Ethan, her hands trembling. "Do you believe me now?" Ethan sank into the chair opposite her, his face pale. I had no idea. I thought—" His voice broke. "I'm so sorry, Mira. I should have seen it. I should have trusted you." Tears welled in Mira's eyes, but she blinked them away. "She wanted you to think I was crazy. She wanted me to think I was crazy, but I'm not, and now I have proof." Ethan nodded, his expression hardening. "What do we do now?" "We stop her," Mira said firmly, "before she does any more damage." The next step. The following morning, Mira and Ethan sat across from their lawyer, Miss Harrington, in a quiet office. The recording played from Mira's phone, Serena's venomous words echoing through the room. When it ended, Miss Harrington leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. "This is damning evidence. With this recording, combined with the emails and receipts, we can build a strong case. The first step will be filing a restraining order against Serena. If she continues to interfere, she'll face legal consequences." Mira nodded, her fingers clenched around the edge of the chair. "She's not going to stop easily." Miss Harrington's gaze sharpened. That's why we're acting quickly. Her behavior is manipulative and dangerous. The restraining order will send a clear message that her actions won't be tolerated. Ethan placed a hand on Mira's, his grip steady. We'll get through this, he said softly. Mira looked at him, her resolve hardening. Yes, we will. That night, Mira lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed the events of the day. The confrontation with Serena, Ethan's apology, and the steps they were taking to protect themselves. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. The pieces Serena had so carefully moved into place were beginning to crumble. But as she drifted off to sleep, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. Serena won't give up that easily. Chapter 6. Breaking the Chains. Mira sat in Miss Harrington's office, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ethan sat beside her, his presence steadying but tense. Across the desk, Miss Harrington reviewed the evidence Mira had meticulously gathered, the damning recording, the forged emails, and the receipts Serena had tried to hide. This is a compelling case, Miss Harrington said, her voice measured. With this evidence, we'll file for a restraining order against Serena immediately. If she violates it, she'll face severe legal consequences. Mira nodded, her shoulders stiff. She's not going to stop easily. Miss Harrington's gaze sharpened. Then we'll ensure the law's on your side. Her behavior is manipulative, calculated, and frankly, dangerous. This isn't just about protecting your reputation. It's about safeguarding your well-being. Ethan reached for Mira's hand, squeezing it gently. We'll get through this together, he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. Mira met his eyes, her resolve hardening. She's taken enough from us. It ends now. Later that evening, Mira sat at the dining table, her laptop open to an email draft she had written to Dr. Calloway, her psychiatrist. The message was direct, outlining the false claims Serena had made about her mental health and attaching the recording as evidence. She hesitated before pressing send, her finger hovering over the button. This was the final piece of Serena's web, her manipulation of the doctors who had trusted her lies. Taking a deep breath, Mira clicked send. The sound of the front door opening pulled her from her thoughts. Ethan stepped in, carrying a stack of takeout containers. I figured we could use a break from cooking, he said, setting the bags down on the counter. Mira smiled faintly, grateful for the small reprieve. As they ate, Ethan reached across the table, his expression serious. I've been thinking about what Serena said in that recording, about how she made me doubt you. Mira looked up, her chest tightening. She's not just manipulative, Ethan continued. She's dangerous, and I let her get too close. He shook his head, guilt darkening his features. I should have seen it sooner. You're seeing it now, Mira said softly. That's what matters. Ethan nodded, but Mira could tell he wasn't ready to forgive himself yet. The confrontation. The next day, Mira received a text from Serena. We need to talk. Meet me at the house. Against Miss Harrington's advice, Mira decided to go. She needed closure, and she knew Serena wouldn't back down without a fight. When Mira arrived, Serena was waiting in the living room, a glass of wine in hand. She wore her signature red lipstick, her demeanor calm but sharp. You've been busy, Serena said, swirling the wine in her glass. Collecting evidence, playing detective. How very ambitious of you. Mira stepped inside, her chin held high. It's over, Serena. I have everything I need, the recording, the emails, the receipts. Ethan knows the truth. The lawyer knows. Dr. Calloway knows. You're finished. Serena's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. You really think a restraining order is going to stop me? Mira didn't flinch. I think it'll make it clear that you're not welcome in my life anymore. Serena set her wineglass down with a loud clink. You don't get it, do you? You've always had everything handed to you. Ethan, your career, your perfect little life. Do you know what it's like to live in someone else's shadow? To always be second best? Mom, that's not my fault, Mira said, her voice steady. You chose to make me your enemy instead of your sister, and now you're going to face the consequences of that choice. Serena's face twisted with anger, the cracks in her composure showing. You don't deserve what you have. You never did. Mira took a step closer, her voice firm. I don't deserve to be gaslit and manipulated either. But you underestimated me, Serena. You thought I'd let you break me. You were wrong. Serena glared at her, her body tense as though she was ready to lash out. But Mira didn't back down. I don't need to fight you anymore, Mira said, turning toward the door. You've already lost. Serena's voice followed her, cold and venomous. This isn't over. Mira didn't stop walking. Yes, it is. Aftermath. The restraining order was approved within days, and Serena's reputation began to crumble as the truth of her manipulations came to light. The emails and recording spread through their small social circle, ensuring no one could be fooled by her charm again. Mira and Ethan began the slow process of rebuilding their trust, attending therapy together, and working to heal the wounds Serena had inflicted. It wasn't easy, but they were committed to moving forward. One afternoon, Mira stood in her garden, the sunlight warm on her face. She clipped a lily from the flower bed, holding it gently in her hand. The flower was a symbol of resilience, a reminder of how far she had come. She had faced the storm and survived. Mira walked back into the house, ready to embrace the life that was hers to live, free from shadows, free from doubt, and free from Serena.